Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. And ladies and gentlemen, we've made it. We've officially made it. It is truly NFL free agency season. The rumor season is behind us, although we're still going to have some rumors over the couple days. But this is when the news becomes news. Everything we've been talking about the last couple months is finally about to come true. It's about to be a very exciting week, as in just a couple hours, the legal tampering period will open, and in just a couple days, the new league year will officially start. This weekend in particular, we had plenty of news, whether it be trades or players signing somewhere else, and I'm so happy to break it down with you guys this morning. So go ahead, take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, welcome in, everyone. Good morning to you, Big Time Timmy Jim. Good morning to you, Bach. Good morning to you, T-Bone. Good morning to you on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, wherever you're watching this morning. Welcome into the show. Let's go ahead and start with the big news of today. As I mentioned at the top of the show, in just a couple hours at noon Eastern, the legal tampering period will open for free agents in the NFL. Basically, what this means is the new league year is starting Wednesday on March 13th. Up until then, starting at noon, teams can still go ahead and meet with all these prospective free agents, start offering them contracts, start coming to deals, because on Wednesday, everything will then become official. Things can go ahead and come official today, but it'll just be like on Wednesday is when these things will happen. So just keep on the lookout. There's a lot of players that are going to be able to sign today, namely Kirk Cousins, Saquon Barkley. We could maybe hear about Josh Jacobs, maybe some Derrick Henry action, maybe some Eckler action, maybe some Tony Pollard action. Either way, all of these free agents that we've been waiting to see where they'll end up signing, we're going to start hearing a lot about where they're going to go, a lot about the prospective teams, a lot about where they're meeting, a lot about the contracts being offered to them. So if you want to hear about all of that stuff, make sure you stay tuned in to Wake and Take all week long, all off season long. We'll be bringing you the news, and we will go ahead and talk about Kirk Cousins, as that's kind of the big mystery that's going to be happening today. And I just want to go ahead and come out and apologize a little bit. I would say that the last few weeks, last month or two, I've been pretty just adamant. Kirk Cousins is going back to Minnesota. Justin Fields is going to the Falcons, and not really presenting both sides of that coin like a true journalist should. So why don't we just go ahead and do that? Because I think that this would be the most important time to kind of delve into the weeds of this Kirk Cousins situation, and then we'll talk about the actual news. But I know all of you want to know about Kirk Cousins. I know it. That's the big story of today. So the most recent news that we have regarding Kirk Cousins is that he's still in communication with the Vikings. That is the biggest thing. He's still in communication with the Vikings. The Vikings are still in communication with him. But Tom Pelissero has come out and said that Kirk Cousins is expected to test the market today at noon when that legal tampering period opens. And again, they're still, kind of in communications with both sides. Deanna Rossini has come out and said that the Vikings are having internal conversations about what contract they can offer Kirk Cousins, and that the internal feeling around the organization is that Kirk Cousins wants to inevitably return to Minnesota. And again, that's what I believe. I really do firmly believe that Kirk Cousins is going to be back in Minnesota, not just because he wants to, but because the team wants him back as well. And I really find it hard to believe that any team is going to want to offer more than what the Vikings would offer him, or at least enough, like substantially enough more to where he would want to leave Minnesota, move his family, make with the new team, all of that stuff. So let's talk about it, though. So the Vikings, as I just talked about, they think he's going to be back. There's still communications. But here's what we know. They have $37 million in cap space, which should be just about enough for Kirk Cousins if it's a one-year contract. And I'm sure they could probably work something else out as well. $37 million available this season should be plenty to get Kirk Cousins back on the team. As we know, and we'll talk about in a bit, Baker Mayfield was able to be brought back despite the Buccaneers not even having more than like $17 million. And yet he still signed like a $30 million contract. The salary cap essentially isn't really that real, but to see that much space still available in Minnesota is really good news for their chances to bring back Kirk Cousins. And again, Reports are saying the Vikings want him there. Reports coming out that he wants to be there. You can just look at what he's done, right? Last season, the week after getting injured, after tearing his Achilles, he was right back in the stadium, handing out turkeys on Thanksgiving, meeting with the city. All off season, he's been doing it as well, going to random community events, doing outreach. I mean, the guy means a lot to this city, and he likes this city. And he's coming off an injury, which is going to make it hard for him to demand a lot of money at his age on the open market. Plus, and this is just mostly a joke, but still, I think it means a little something. If you guys remember a couple weeks back, Kirk Cousins got a brand new grill, got golden teeth, and tagged Justin Jefferson in it, talking about how he's excited to get his grill game up. And Justin Jefferson replies, I mean, they've got a really good friendship there. Again, I just don't... To me, it makes too much sense for him to go to Minnesota. It really, really does. So that's what I think. That's why he wants to be there. The Vikings want him there. They've got $37 million. He got a brand new grill and was talking with Justin Jefferson about it. The dude's probably going to be there. But if you flip a coin and you go to the other side, if it's tails, it's probably the Atlanta Falcons. Those are really the two teams at this point that are going to be able to feasibly get Kirk Cousins on their team. So for the Falcons, this is why people think he'll go there. They have $41 million in cap space. They clearly need a quarterback. And the new offensive coordinator and head coach, really, Raheem Morris, Zach Robinson, they're tied to the Rams, who Kevin O'Connell was tied to. And it's basically kind of the same system that is being run in Minnesota, that's being run in Los Angeles, kind of similar to what's going on with Shanahan in San Francisco. In those systems, generally, you want a pocket passing, just field general quarterback, and Kirk Cousins does exemplify that. And that's why the fit for Atlanta makes a lot of sense to a lot of people, especially with how much money they have. But I also just want to urge that this is still just year one of this system, a system that we haven't even seen from Zach Robinson was just the quarterback's coach. I mean, like, we don't even know how much of what was being run in Los Angeles was even really him. And so he's probably still going to want to throw his own spin. So I just think it's unfair to just draw a one-for-one comparison from the Los Angeles Rams to the Atlanta Falcons, especially with Raheem Morris being the head coach, who was the interim head coach. He's been all over the league in numerous different situations. I really find it, a little unfair to just suggest that the Falcons are going to copycat the Rams offense. I just don't think that's the case, but that is the reasoning for Kirk Cousins coming to Atlanta. And there's tons of reports out there. You can go look. The Falcons are clearly interested in Kirk Cousins. It does make sense. He would be a good quarterback with those weapons. But again, I just think he's going to be back in Minnesota. But that's why we lay out the Atlanta situation. Again, $41 million in cap. The Falcons are interested in him, and he would kind of fit the system that's expected to be run. Again, expected to be run. But that's kind of the situation there. We're going to find out again at noon. What I fully expect to happen is Kirk Cousins will be offered a contract by the Falcons. He's going to bring it to the Vikings, and the Vikings are going to say, okay, we can match that. Because the Vikings have until Wednesday to figure out a deal with Kirk Cousins. If they don't, they will count $28 million towards dead cap on the team. They have to figure out something before Wednesday, or they're going to lose $30 million, which is something they don't want to do. And so I expect either Kirk Cousins to go to Atlanta before Wednesday, or him to just re-sign by Wednesday with the Vikings. But either way, we're only going to have a couple more days of this. We're going to know where Kirk Cousins lands soon. And then that will be kind of the final domino to fall in this free agency quarterback market as Russell Wilson. Actually, before we move on, that was a good segue. But before we move on, I kind of want to check the chat, see if anyone's talking about this. Let's see. Got to treat Kirk like a 41-year-old high-end Major League Baseball special pitcher. 1 year, $55 million. Makes sense. Makes sense. I mean, I get it. 1 year, lots of money. And I see lots of breaking news. T. Higgins is requesting a trade, which is also what we've been expecting, to be completely honest. If you tuned into Trade Gods last week, I talked about buying Andre Yosevich because Matthew Berry had reported that the Bengals were trying to trade T. Higgins. And so now that T. Higgins is requesting a trade, that's very, very interesting, which just reminds us, and as we talked about on the franchise tag episodes, franchise tags mean nothing. Yes, it means that they're back on the team and they have a contract for the year. But as we're seeing with L'Jarius Sneed in Kansas City, they're shopping him. As we're seeing now with T. Higgins, he's being shopped and doesn't even want to be there. And so the franchise tag, while it means a little bit, doesn't mean as much as a lot of people say. It usually just kind of leads into another contract, as we're about to see with Antoine Winfield, as we're going to see with Kyle Duggar in New England. All of these things kind of change. And just because there's a franchise tag doesn't mean that's exactly what's going to happen. And so that's the T. Higgins situation, which is really, really cool. Box says no love for Charlie Football. I did say that Charlie Football is a good buy too, but Charlie Football is going to take more of the Tyler Boyd spot, which is available. Tyler Boyd is also scheduled to be a free agent. But Andre Iosivas being 6'3", 200 pounds, running such a good 40, yada, 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 he's more of the outside of the field or outside of the numbers T. Higgins type replacement. And that's why I really, really like that. So go get your Iosivas, go get your Charlie Football. Let's go ahead and move on, though, to the actual news. We'll definitely be breaking down T. Higgins all offseason and all that, which really just makes me believe if there's a buy window for Joe Burrow, do it. If there's a buy window for Jamar Chase, do it. That the Bengals offense, I still think, is going to be really, really good next year, and I'm expecting a big rebound from Joe Burrow. But either way, let's go ahead and move on now into the news. We've talked about this Kirk Cousins situation. That's where we're at. At noon, he will probably get a contract offer from the Falcons. We'll probably hear about it. And then there's going to be a few hours where he's back in Minnesota talking about that contract with the Vikings, seeing what they can do, guys. I'm telling you, first choice for Kirk Cousins is the Vikings. Just saying it. If he doesn't get what he wants, that's when he'll go to Atlanta. But I really do believe while he fits in Atlanta, that the Vikings want him there, Kirk Cousins wants to be there, yada, yada, yada. The money's about the same on both sides. He's going to be a Viking. But either way, have to entertain the Falcons possibility. Which means we will now move on to Russell Wilson. And this one I've also got to apologize for. Because Russell Wilson was the one I perfectly called just a few weeks ago. And then I kind of got lost in the sauce. I was like, Russell Wilson's going to the Steelers. They don't have a ton of cap space. They could easily use a veteran quarterback like him for such a cheap contract. They need a quarterback. All of this fun stuff. And then all of these reports start coming out that Arthur Smith really likes Kenny Pickett, that the ownership is really in on Kenny Pickett, that the coaching staff is ready for a quarterback battle with him and Mason Rudolph, and they're just going to go with that. And so I was honestly kind of talking myself into it, especially with just how stupid Arthur Smith is. I mean, I when you hear that Arthur Smith likes a quarterback, you just kind of go, oh no, and say, well, I guess that's going to be the case. But luckily for the Steelers, they are going another way. Kenny Pickett just was not the answer. And I like Mason Rudolph. I really do. And I think it's kind of unfair to him based on how he closed out the season. But this is the right move for the franchise, even with Russell Wilson kind of on the end of his career trajectory for sure. So apologize for kind of getting lost in the sauce. Gosh, what's going on with me right now? Anyway, apologies for getting lost in the sauce with Russell Wilson. I really did think he was going to the Steelers just a few weeks ago. And then for some reason last week, I was like, maybe no one really wants Russell Wilson with all the reports coming out. But that's why you've got to remain convicted, ladies and gentlemen. That's why Justin Fields is going to Atlanta. That's why Kirk Cousins is going to Minnesota. That's why Saquon Barkley's going to the Texans, because we're convicted in it and we're not backing down. Russell Wilson is going to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers on Wednesday when the new league year starts. And I don't know if it's going to be that we talk about kind of the decline from Russell Wilson, but you can kind of look into his metrics last season and paint a picture where things might actually be okay. So last season, 3,000 pass yards, but 26 touchdowns, which was 9th in the league. He had 17.7 fantasy points per game, which was 12th in the league, and had a solid completion percentage at 66%. He also added 341 rush yards and 3 rushing touchdowns on the ground, showing that he still has a little bit of mobility, still can do a lot of things outside of the pocket. And last season on the Broncos, he led all quarterbacks in pressured throws. He was the most pressured quarterback, had 129 of his passes under pressure, and the Broncos themselves had the 34th best protection rate. Yes, outside of the top 32 means that there were backup offensive lines better than what the Broncos were putting out there last season. He was not in a good situation for a quarterback to remain in the pocket. Granted, he is more of an outside of the pocket quarterback, but when you're getting that much pressure, you can't even get that far, especially when your wide receivers aren't that great and your play callers aren't really scheming players open in a great way. But despite being so pressured, Russell Wilson still was only 21st in interceptable passes and was actually 3rd in the league in pressured completion percentage. And I point that out because normally when someone has a really, really high pressured completion percentage, it means that they weren't pressured a lot. But given the fact that he was basically the most pressured quarterback in the league and still top 3 in pressured completion percentage, that's a good thing. that shows that he can be a good quarterback under duress. And that's what you want to see from a quarterback, especially a veteran quarterback. And so last season, there's still, I could keep going. I mean, he was 13th in passer rating versus man, 13th in passer rating versus zone. I mean, it wasn't that bad of a season last year when you really dive into it and understand all of the circumstances going against him in Denver. And so now he goes to Pittsburgh, which is just an offense that's going to be fine. He's not going to have to beat the world or anything. And that's exactly what he needs right now. And it's going to be, I really do think it's going to be totally fine. I think he's going to be like a quarterback 15 type option here. Again, he was 12th in points per game last season, so it's not that much of a stretch. And I think with the Arthur Smith offense, he's not going to be asked to do a ton, but then it'll also fit his strengths. I mean, they're like Arthur Smith's going to scheme him outside of the pocket a lot. There's going to be a lot of RPOs type stuff. There's going to be some designed quarterback runs. He's going to be asked to scramble a lot, and that's what he's good at. And I think with George Pickens, I think that that's going to be good. I think Pat Freiermuth will help him a lot. And I think that run game with Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, I think that's going to be really, really solid as well. So if they can bring in another wide receiver in the second round, which I think they're going to do, especially if they do move on from Deontay Johnson, we're talking about a pretty solid Steelers offense. Not a great one, but one that should still compete. And if you remember, the Steelers somehow always make the playoffs, and they'll probably do it again with Russell Wilson. He's not going to have like 4,000 pass yards and 30 touchdowns, or maybe 40 touchdowns, but he could get you still the 3K, 20-something touchdowns, low interceptions, and that's an okay season. That's all right. And so I'm not too pessimistic about Russell Wilson going to Pittsburgh. I think it's going to be totally fine. And I'm excited to see what can happen for George Pickens and really just George Pickens. I'm kind of excited to see what happens with him now that he has a quarterback who's a little less afraid to sling it. It should be pretty fun. And then on this note, Ari Myrov from Twitter has come out and said that it is unlikely that Mason Rudolph returns to the Steelers and that this quarterback battle will be between Russell Wilson and Kenny Pickett. Russell Wilson's going to win it, let's be honest here. But there's still probably a chance that Kenny Pickett is a good backup quarterback in Superflex leagues, someone to hold on to with basically no trade value. But if Russell Wilson gets hurt, given his age and injury history, he's right back to starting again. So I would say, if you own Kenny Pickett, hold on to him. And I'm not sure what to do with Mason Rudolph. If he's out of Pittsburgh, that sucks. I don't really know what the situation would be there. And I feel for him. Because again, Mason Rudolph came in last season after Mitchell Trubisky. I mean, he was their third option. And what did he do? He played well. He won games, and he led the Pittsburgh Steelers to the playoffs. That's really all you want from your quarterback. And I really feel bad for him, the fact that he's probably going to be the odd man out here and not on the team anymore just because of draft capital at the end of the day. And so you feel for Mason Rudolph, and you feel like things are going to be okay for Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh. The notes are that it's just going to be a one-year contract, so it's not like he's going to be there that long, although he could, if he plays well, get a second contract if he really, really wants one. But either way, Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh, Mason Rudolph probably not much longer. And that's that story. And we'll go ahead and stay with the Broncos. Actually, I guess I'll check in the chat. There's 19 comments here. Great stuff here. Great stuff, guys. Welcome into the chat. Wow, you guys are killing it over here. This is crazy. You guys are popping off. Thanks, guys, for being so active. Good morning to you all. Let's see. I stashed Josephus last year, thanks to Jason. Nice. Cool. Where is Justin Fields going? Atlanta. Thoughts on Freiermuth? Fine. I think he's the most – Pat Freiermuth is the most fine tight end in the league. You're not going to be upset with him. You're not going to be crazy excited with him. He's going to have a good season. I know that doesn't really help you too much, but this is the exact type of tight end that I try to avoid unless I have like a ceiling, like boom bust guy. Like Pat Freiermuth is good to pair with like a Kyle Pitts, like if Kyle Pitts just isn't doing what you want, you could just go with the safer option. I just don't ever see much ceiling from Pat Freiermuth. Let's see. Foxworth 7, Brittany, one of our great graphic designers, doing great work on our thumbnails and on the Instagram. So you would say Russell Wilson, he still got it? I love that. Great pun. Good stuff there. The Russ bus, dangerous bus. Yes, I like that. And cool. That looks to be it on the Steelers. put Coleman, actually, yeah, put Keon Coleman opposite Pickens so Russ can toss it up and out of play action. That would be really, really cool too. There's a lot of wide receivers that they could probably stretch the field with that I think would fit well next season. So either way, Steelers, I think they're trending up. I think things are going to be fine for them next year. And we'll stay within the Broncos and talk about Jerry Jeudy, who was sent to the Cleveland Browns this weekend. The Broncos are getting a 5th and 6th round pick in return. They free up about $13 million in cap space, and they're now around $30 million under the cap, which is really, really good for the Broncos as they head into this rebuild. But on the Jerry Jeudy front, I'm not really expecting too much. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Not that I've ever really felt anything would happen from these two, but rest in peace to Elijah Moore. Rest in peace to David Bell. I really find it hard for them to break out in this system. If they were going to, it probably would have been last year. It didn't happen. I doubt it does happen. Not that Jerry Jeudy's going to be a world beater or anything, but he's still a solid wide receiver 2 on this offense, and he's still going to get enough volume to take away from these other guys to where they're really not going to be that feasible unless there's an injury. But with Jerry Jeudy, don't expect him to take a big leap. I'm really not expecting Jerry Jeudy to do too much because A, Deshaun Watson still hasn't shown enough to make you believe he's a good fantasy quarterback. B, Amari Cooper is still there and he's going to get most of the targets and he's still a really good wide receiver. And C, Jerry Jeudy lacks effort. Like, he does not really try that hard when he's out there. You see him take a lot of plays off. You see him kind of forget to put down the second foot to score a touchdown. You see him kind of half-ass some routes. So unless he kind of fixes all of those things, unless Deshaun Watson decides to be Deshaun Watson again, unless Amari Cooper is gone or hurt, I can't imagine too much from Jerry Jeudy. This is a guy that if you can get a second or even a 3rd round pick for him in your rookie drafts, I would probably move on from him at that cost. I think that you're going to be able to get a bit more ceiling with that draft pick than what you're going to get from Jerry Jeudy, unfortunately. Now, could you maybe trade for Jerry Jeudy around week 13 this season and maybe hope that Amari Cooper is gone for 2025? Sure. But for 2024 purposes, I think I'm going to be staying away from Jerry Jeudy. But in case you want to find some metrics to maybe get involved with him, last year, I guess this wouldn't make you excited, but let's just talk about his stats. Last year, he had 758 yards off of 54 receptions and only scored twice. And he was 55th in points per game with 8.9. So really not that efficient, not that effective of a fantasy player. In fact, a pretty bad year. But the year before, he was 19th in points per game with 13.6, which is pretty solid. That's what you would want from Jerry Jeudy if you roster him. He had 972 yards and 6 touchdowns, which is a solid season from him. But you know, again, that was 2 seasons ago, and we haven't seen that in a minute. And now he's in Cleveland with a quarterback that's been taking a big decline. But last year, he was still top 20 in 2 metrics. 2 metrics Jerry Jeudy was top 20 in last year. He was 17th in unrealized air yards with 745, showing he could have had a little bit of a better season last year if he brought in a couple more passes or if Russell Wilson delivered them a little bit better. And he was 14th in target separation with an average of 2 yards of separation per target per route run, which is really solid. Still showing that he's a really, really good route runner and with the right quarterback could be good. I just don't know if this Browns system is the right one. They're bringing back Nick Chubb. It's going to still be pretty run heavy. Deshaun Watson is still not slinging it the way he used to. David Njoku also is still getting a ton of targets kind of over the middle of the field as well, where Jerry Jeudy would excel. So I'm not expecting a ton from Jerry Jeudy here. I'm not going to lie. And I would probably maybe if there's a dip in value on Amari Cooper or David Njoku, I would maybe buy those guys as I think they would probably be fine. But even then, they're still a little expensive. So either way, that's the Jerry Jeudy stuff. Am I a sicko or just a truther that I'm confident Elijah Moore over Jerry Jeudy? You are a truther and a sicko. It is not both or either or. You are both a truther and a sicko for saying that. And I'm sorry. Would you rather see Derrick Henry to Dallas or Houston? Dallas. I want Saquon in Houston. We'll go ahead and move on now to Baker Mayfield. the Baker Mayfield news that we've all been waiting for. He's back in Tampa as expected. We've been talking about this all off season. I never really wavered on this one, as I should have with every other story. Usually I feel like when I go through the process for wake and take, I generally come to what happens. I feel like I've been hitting pretty well this off season, and I hope it continues with Justin Fields going to Atlanta, Kirk Cousins going back to Minnesota, and Saquon Barkley going to Houston. But either way, Baker Mayfield has re-signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's a 3-year contract worth up to $100 million, with $50 million of it guaranteed. Really solid contract for him, and I'm excited to kind of see how it's broken down on a year-to-year basis when that comes out. As we remember, the Mike Evans contract, there was a lot of kind of cap space wizardry going on to make it work for the team. I'm sure a lot of the same is happening here with Baker Mayfield because, again, they still want to get a contract for Antoine Winfield, and they still have to figure out what to do with Levante David. So that's the Buccaneers. And it makes a lot of sense. Last season, Baker Mayfield had basically the best year of his career. He had 4,000 pass yards and 28 touchdowns, which was 7th in the league. This was always going to happen. We knew it. He was never going to test free agency as they saw. And if he did, he noticed very quickly that the Buccaneers were giving him the best offer. And I'm glad he's back. It's really good for the Buccaneers. They're going to be able to contend for the NFC South again. They almost beat the Lions in the playoffs, guys. I mean, we almost saw the Buccaneers in the NFC Championship last year. Like, they had a really good season. A lot of the team is still back, and the division is still wide open as a lot of the teams are still kind of figuring out what they're doing in 2024. And so I like this a lot for the Buccaneers. We knew it was going to happen, and it's good for Baker Mayfield. It's good for Mike Evans. It's really good for Chris Godwin. I think he's a really good value, and we'll see what happens in the draft. I mean, I think that they could probably add another running back to go with Rachaad White. They could probably get another wide receiver unless they're really confident in Trey Palmer. But either way, this Buccaneers team, basically as good as they were last year, and in fact could be even better going into year 2, seeing if Baker Mayfield can truly take even another step forward. I don't know how you get much better than 28 touchdowns and 4,000 pass yards if you're Baker Mayfield, but it could happen. It could happen, so I like it a lot. Good for Baker, good for the Bucs. We'll move on now to another move, and this is Mac Jones. Mac Jones is being traded away from the New England Patriots, heading to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 6th-round pick. And I've got to say, I feel really bad for Mac Jones. I really do. I think it's a little bit of unlucky. Yes, the last 2 seasons have been terrible, but I mean, one of his head coach or offensive coordinators was Matt Patricia, and last year the Patriots were just so bad. Bill Belichick on the end of his career. Bill O'Brien, not that good of an NFL coordinator. So Mac Jones just, I mean, look at this. Just had a really bad last couple seasons, because you look at his rookie year. Played all 17 games, had 3,800 pass yards and 22 touchdowns. And then the next year, he went down to 3,000 yards, 2,996, and 14 touchdowns in only 14 games. And then last year, 2,100 yards and 10 touchdowns in only 11 games. So played in less games every single year, threw for less touchdowns every single year, threw for less yards every single year. But again, the situation was basically getting worse every single year. So you've got to feel for the guy who led the Patriots to the playoffs in his very first season in the NFL. And interestingly enough, guys, listen to this. Mac Jones last season, listen to this, finished top 10 in accuracy rating, red zone accuracy rating, completion percentage versus man, completion percentage versus zone, pressured, catchable pass rate, clean pocket accuracy rating versus man, accuracy rating versus zone, and interceptable passes. But either way, him being top 10 in all of those accuracy metrics, all of those completion percentage metrics is really, really solid. And so while he's not really going to have another chance to start anytime soon, I think that this Jaguars landing spot is good for him and good for the Jaguars. He's going to be able to take some time off, sit back, relax as the backup to Trevor Lawrence with a really good quarterback head coach in Doug Peterson, perhaps able to learn some stuff, and probably going to have a couple times each season where he will be able to start, whether it be like week 18 because the Jaguars have locked down the division, or Trevor Lawrence gets a minor injury again, like he seems to get every single season, missing just a couple games before toughing it out. But either way, CJ Beathard was not that good for the Jaguars last year as the backup, and they clearly needed a backup quarterback. Ultimately, that's what lost them the division, by not having a backup quarterback. And so I think Mac Jones is really, really good for them. And again, I think the Jaguars is good for him. Yeah, he's not starting, but he might have an opportunity to get some action, is certainly going to be able to learn a lot from Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence, and it should be okay. And maybe in a couple seasons, we could see him traded again, a la Sam Darnold, just kind of being bounced around from team to team. But that's the Mac Jones news, traded away from New England to the Jaguars. Good for all sides, really. Which brings us to the next Patriots news, and that is them signing Kendrick Bourne to a 3-year contract. It is worth a maximum of $33 million and a minimum of $19.5 million. So about $6 million a year with lots of incentives laid in. It's really not that expensive. It's actually a pretty solid contract for not only Kendrick Bourne, but also for the Patriots, given how expensive the wide receiver market is right now. I mean, most wide receivers are commanding at least like $16 million a year. So to get one that's been solid when healthy for $6 million a year is pretty solid. But he is 29 years old when the season rolls around and is coming off a torn ACL, so it's hard to expect too much from him. He also hasn't had more than 450 yards in 2 seasons and has only eclipsed 500 yards twice in his 7-year career. So it's not like he's ever shown much ceiling in terms of a season completion, but has had some flashes in games, multiple 2-touchdown games, and last season finished with 12.5 points per game, which was really, really solid given, his role and how bad this offense was. And so I think that this is a good signing for the Patriots to get a role-playing wide receiver, a guy familiar with the offense and system and organization and culture for a pretty cheap deal, just to kind of stick around and be there. And I'm sure the Patriots will still address the wide receiver room. I doubt they go out there Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, Tyquan Thornton. But it's still good to see the continuity. I think that that's a good depth, all of those wide receivers. So if they could get one early in the second round this year, or if they really want to go crazy and get Marvin Harrison Jr., I wouldn't blame them. But I think with them trading away Mac Jones, re-signing Kendrick Bourne shows that they're probably looking at drafting a quarterback at number 3. And all the reports out there are that it's going to be Jaden Daniels, that they're not that into Drake May. And if it's not Jaden Daniels, they might trade back. But either way, Patriots are going to have to get a quarterback, and their wide receiver room is basically intact, and I would expect at least one more addition, whether it be the draft or free agency. So that's the big Patriots news, the big Broncos news, the big Buccaneers news. We've talked about Kirk Cousins. Let's talk about the Lions. The Lions are bringing back Craig Reynolds. Woo! All right, let's talk about the Jaguars. I guess I probably could have done this after Mac Jones. On top of bringing in Mac Jones, the Jaguars are also continuing to elevate their offensive line. We talked last week, they re-signed their guard. They have now brought in a center from Buffalo, Mitch Morse, for a really good deal. 2 years, $10.5 million with 7 of it guaranteed. Really cheap for a starting center in the league. Really good to see the Jaguars bolstering that offensive line. They really need it, and I hope that they can take a really good step forward next year. Last year was weird. It was a down year for them after having so much hype. I would like them to bounce back, and I think this is how you start, by bolstering that offensive line. So that is all of the news, which brings us to the final topic of the show. I see it in the chat. I see it all over. Where is Justin Fields going? Again, I'm going to say the Atlanta Falcons, but we'll talk about this because Mac Jones only going for a 6th-round pick does have some implications for Justin Fields, and there's lots of people out there saying it. Now, Justin Fields has done better than Mac Jones has and is a little bit more of a tantalizing prospect than Mac Jones is, so I doubt Justin Fields goes for a 6th. But I do think the talk of him going for a 1st or even a 2nd are probably out the window now. I think if Justin Fields is moved from Chicago, it's probably about a 3rd-round pick, or maybe like a 2nd and they add something else into it maybe. But either way, I don't see high-end trade package going for Justin Fields, which kind of does make some sense with the 5th-year decision still on the table. Here's a quote that I found interesting and also calling bullshit on, but found interesting. Right now, the message the Bears are getting is that they don't consider Fields is that teams don't consider Fields more of a sure thing than other potential one-year options from the past, such as Sam Darnold or Drew Lock, who wouldn't come with the fifth-year decision. So basically what this quote is saying is that NFL teams are a little worried about trading for Justin Fields just because the Bears never decided on the fifth-year option, which shows that they were a little unsure about Justin Fields' capability as a franchise quarterback. And so teams don't really want to have to make that decision without having really any information of Justin Fields on their own team. Basically, whatever team trading for Justin Fields has until May 2nd to decide if they want to take Justin Fields' fifth-year option, which would be about $21 million guaranteed, which is a cheap deal for a good quarterback. And so I'm a little shocked that teams are worried about that. Because I think if I'm the Falcons again, I would trade for Justin Fields, give up that third, and have a quarterback the next 2 seasons for only about $30 million over the next 2 years. That's a good deal, especially with all those weapons around him. That's what I would do. I think it makes a ton of sense. And I'm a little shocked to hear that this quote suggests that teams view Justin Fields as a Sam Darnold type prospect. I think that's ridiculous. I think Justin Fields has shown a ton more than Sam Darnold ever did. And I know Justin Fields isn't the best passer in the world and holds on to the ball long and has some other bad issues with him. But he's not as bad as Sam Darnold or Drew Lock. I think that's ridiculous. It's absurd. He's not that bad. So I just think that this is more of a weird time of the year for the Justin Fields things. I think we're just with all these trade rumors. I think that there's just kind of both sides competing to affect the trade value. The Bears are out there spreading rumors that, you know, he's going for a lot to try to drive the trade value up. And then the teams that do want Justin Fields are saying, oh, you know, we just view him as Sam Darnold. We don't want to give up too much. This is just negotiation. I'm not going to read too much into it. What I am going to read a little bit into, which I think is interesting, is Adam Schefter this morning or yesterday. I didn't see the exact date, but it was this weekend within the last couple days. Adam Schefter actually came out and said that the Falcons haven't given much strong consideration into Fields, which I find a little strange given what we heard from the combine and kind of just what we're expecting, given he, you know, from Atlanta and they need a quarterback. And that's kind of the other big name tied to Atlanta outside of Kirk Cousins. So I think it's weird that Adam Schefter, someone with that much like rep, is saying that the Falcons haven't given much thought into the Justin Fields experiment. And spoiler alert, they're going to have to. They're going to have to. Because unless Zach Robinson and Raheem Morris liked what they saw in Carson Wentz last year in Los Angeles when they brought him in, or want Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback, or I guess J.J. McCarthy, Justin Fields is going to have to be their answer. I know that they're going to have a chance today to get Kirk Cousins. I really don't think it's going to happen. If it does, good for the Falcons and good for Kirk Cousins. But I really think Justin Fields is going to end up being the best option out there, which just brings us back to a couple weeks ago when the Bears came out and said, we're going to wait for the Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins dominoes to fall before we do a trade with Justin Fields, because that makes a ton of sense for Chicago. Teams need to know that if they want a quarterback, it's going to come at the cost of Justin Fields. And I still think that Justin Fields has shown more than enough flashes that he could be okay. I really do think that he could even be really, really good, especially on the Falcons. I really do think that system would fit him well. He gets to be close to home. He has a ton of weapons. He has a competent head coach and offensive coordinator who should be able to scheme the offense around him and be able to teach him some lessons and help him grow out of a lot of the things that negatively impact his passing game. So I really do think it's fine. I really do think any situation is better than Chicago with Matt Eberflus as the head coach. I think that was just a disaster waiting to happen. It was Nagy before that. I mean, Justin Fields hasn't had the best coaching around him, nor really the best weapons or offensive line. So I do think that the jury is more than still out with Justin Fields. And I think it's going to be special when he lands in Atlanta. All right, let's see. Where do we think T goes? Hopefully the Panthers, that someone shouts out. I really do like that. Let's see. T is not leaving, says John Hendricks. Believe it when I see it. I don't know. This is something that we've been talking about for 3 years now. And I believe when there's smoke, there's fire. I think at some point he's not going to be a Bengal. And I don't think he wants to be a Bengal. I think he wants to be a wide receiver one. I would hate, if I'm as talented as T. Higgins, to have someone even more talented than me on the other side sometimes. Like, I would just hate it. You know, this is a guy that probably wants to be the wide receiver one for a team, wants to get all those targets, and he can't do it with Ja'Marr Chase out there. Big Time Timmy Jim says, I feel like Fields should either go to a team that wants to tank or be a high-end backup for another rushing quarterback. I really don't think Fields should be a backup. But if he does, I guess, yeah, a Jalen Hurts backup or Lamar Jackson backup would be fine. I would hate to see him back up Anthony Richardson. I would hate that. I would absolutely hate that. But either way, I think we're going to see some good stuff from Justin Fields, and I think he's going to go somewhere and start next year, and I think it's going to be fine, at least for fantasy football. At least for fantasy football, right? So either way, that is all the news that look to be all the questions. So thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, this was a fun episode of The Wake and Take, and you guys were a fantastic audience. I hope to see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern on the Player Profiler, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Go ahead and hit the like button on this video, and go ahead and subscribe to Player Profiler to get plenty more videos like this one from plenty other talented hosts with tons and tons of information to help you win your fantasy football leagues. Again, subscribe to Player Profiler and like this video. You all have a magnificent Monday and a fantastic week. Have a good one. Peace.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.